Anthrax, Armed and Dangerous EP. We're going to talk about this one today. We haven't done much heavy metal on this yet, and this is where we're going to start. So, there. Armed and Dangerous is the first EP by Anthrax, released in February of 1985 on Megaforce Records. There's nothing really spectacular about this EP, but it represents an interesting time in the history of the band. Before I get into this, though, the last episode of the series I did, I noticed my eyebrows needed some trimming. I was going to do that before this, but in honor of Scott Ian's eyebrows circa 1985, I decided to keep them intact. On August 3rd, 1984, at the Roseland Ballroom in New York City, a night Scott Ian called one of the most important nights in New York City for heavy metal, Raven, Metallica, and Anthrax played what was famously one of the greatest metal shows, like he said, in New York City. And shortly after, all three bands got signed. Metallica with Elektra, Anthrax with Island, and Raven with Atlantic. Poor Raven, they never, got the respect and accolades as the other two. And, not as great as both of those bands, but still a solid band. I have a lot of their stuff here. Maybe we'll talk about them at some point. Anthrax at this time had one record out called Fistful of Metal, a great early thrash metal album in its own right. And just like Metallica's Kill 'Em All LP, it was more of a sneak peek of what was to come. And like Kill 'Em All, not the best production, but the band sounds so fresh and hungry on these two records, it would be hard not to hop on the bandwagon, Fistful of Metal, which touts one of the silliest record covers of all time that, people have pointed out, shows a person being punched through their face with a right hand while a right hand holds the head, or maybe it's a left hand punching and a left hand holding the head, or maybe it's a right hand is on the left side. Anyway, it doesn't matter. It's literally someone getting punched through their stupid fucking face. And the album opens with the 1-2 punch of Death Rider and Metal Thrashing Mad, a song about riding a horse and just friggin' killing everything and destroying everything in sight. And then Metal Thrashing Mad, which is, essentially a thrash metal Detroit rock city. It's essentially about driving really fast like a maniac. I wonder if the guys from Metallica's Whiplash was in the car with him and that's how he got Whiplash. I'm sorry, that's stupid. Anthrax entered Pyramid Sound Studios in Ithaca, New York soon afterwards to work on their second full-length album. The band produced the album with Carl Kennedy. Carl Kennedy was and John Zazula, acting as the executive producer. And John Zazula, of course, ran Megaforce Records and was sort of a big part of that whole scene. And Carl Kennedy was the drummer for the band The Rods, who also featured Dave Feinstein, who was Ronnie James Dio's cousin, and they played in Elf together. Right before the studio sessions, they lost their singer, Neil Turbin. They needed a singer as they had studio time, booked, and Megaforce label head and all-around great guy, I was just saying, John Zazula, said they should just start recording and search for a singer while they're recording these tracks. And I gotta tell you, if you haven't heard the demos from this era, there's a deluxe edition of the Spreading the Disease album, and it has the rhythm tracks that they recorded, Scott and Frank and Charlie, and I guess Dan Spitz, and it's sick. It's the riffs on there is just crazy, and I guess at this point Charlie was now writing some of the riffs, and he's famously and a great musician all around. He's written a lot of their songs, but these demos though, you can hear the influences loud and clear. With Scott, I hear, Michael Schenker, and, Charlie, I hear, Tommy Aldridge. At least that's what I hear. But these guys are spitting out so many riffs in this era, if you think about it, between, the Spreading the Disease record and the SOD record, which is, a questionable record, but that's still a great record, I think. It's silly, but it's got amazing riffs. That's what you need. And I'm going to say this once, and you can disagree with me all you want, it's fine. But when it comes to the best rhythm guitar players in thrash, at least in the 80s, between James Hetfield and Scott Ian, Scott gets my vote. His down picking is epic, and he always looks like he's going to die when he's playing, And when it comes to songwriting credits in this era, by the way. It does get a little spotty, but I do know that Dan Lilker wrote the music for Armed and Dangerous, and Neil Turbin wrote the lyrics. Neither of these two would play on the version that ended up on the Spreading the Disease record, for which the song appears, but yeah. So Carl Kennedy saw Belladonna fronting a band called Bible Black and suggested Joey Belladonna to the band. Joey was almost a Steve Perry clone. He had that same high rock and roll voice. And I guess when he arrived at the studio the first time, he was sort of decked out in leopard print clothing and spandex or whatever. And the guys were all sitting around in agnostic front shirts and ripped jeans. And I guess after they played a little, Scott said, I'm not trying to be a dick here. This is me misquoting him, but essentially was saying like, not trying to be a dick here, but we kind of dress like this. And I guess Joey Belladonna said, thank God, because I was just sort of trying to impress you guys. I didn't know what this was going to be like, so this isn't how I dress. So yeah. And also, Joey apparently wasn't even familiar with the band at the time. And the first song I guess they recorded was Medusa, which is a great song on Spreading the Disease. So this is the first Anthrax release to feature Joey Belladonna on vocals and Frank Bello on bass. Frank, who is Charlie Benante's nephew, replaced Dan Lilker, of course. Maybe they thought having two Dans in the band was, too confusing and, just kept Dan Spitz. And also, did you know Dan Spitz is a famous watchmaker right now? You should look that up. Or I'll put a thing on the thing. You can see it. So this record, the song Armed and Dangerous, also appears on the album Spreading the Disease. It came out a little while after this, and it's a different mix. It doesn't include the fade-in intro leading into with the acoustic guitar melody. The song is a classic melodic metal song, at least as far as the intro goes, before it abandons that and is, straight up headbanger. With lyrics basically about fighting back against, who or whatever is holding you down and just like totally crushing them with power. Yeah, it's a heavy metal song. When they played the song live early on, they went right into they used the intro, but later on they dropped the intro and sort of started it at the part when the distorted guitar comes in and the metal shows up. I'll stop doing that. This is stupid. The second song in this record is Raise Hell, which to me sounds kind of like Madhouse, and I probably should have researched this a little better because I feel like it might be like an early version of that because it sort of follows the same melody a little bit. So it makes me think of Madhouse anyway, but it's a good song. And then there's a cover of the Sex Pistols' God Save the Queen, which, some people have said started the trend of metal bands covering the Sex Pistols, which I don't know, was that a trend? The only other one I can think of right now is Megadeth's Anarchy in the UK, and, both of the covers are fine, but, I love that Sex Pistols record, and, it's one of those records like the Beatles or I don't know, I don't know, you don't need to cover, they're good enough as they are. And then there's two more songs in this record that are listed as live, but they're essentially studio tracks, and it's two songs from the debut record, but sung by Joey. Metal Thrashing Mad and Panic. And Panic that's a good song. I mean, both of those songs are great, but Panic is just like a chuggy metal masterpiece. Under those songs on the back cover, it says Scott Ian guitar right and Dan Spitz guitar left. I kind of like when they do that. I think they used to do that with Slayer as well. Oh yeah, one other thing about Dan Spitz, his brother Dave Spitz, Dave the Beast Spitz, played bass with Black Sabbath later on, the Seventh Star and Eternal Idol records. I realize it's weird to ever say someone plays bass for Black Sabbath and they're not named Geezer Butler, so I like Black Sabbath. Big fan. We'll get into those someday. The 1992 CD reissue of this record includes the songs Soldiers of Metal and Howling Furies as its last two tracks. The lineup for those two tracks is Neil Turbin, Scott Ian, Dan Spitz, Greg D'Angelo, except where Charlie Benante re-recorded the drums, and Dan Lilker. It was released as a double album in Germany in 2000. And the cover and artwork on this record, the band all clad in black and camouflage, pretty much the standard at the time. All of them have teased hair, and yeah, they look like they're down for some serious business, something that would change in a few short years. But we'll get to that in a minute. The only other notable things on the cover is the weird font of Armed and Dangerous, which I do kind of like. It's, looks like it's like an ice cream parlor font or something. Like what is that? And then it also has this thing where it says, "Get ready to spread it in '85," which I imagine at the time, you didn't know there was an album coming called Spreading the Disease. You might think the band is taking like a different direction, Spreading the Disease really is my favorite record by the band. And, I liked everything they've done up to, I like the stuff they did with John Bush, or at least the first two. Sound of White Noise is a perfect record, I think. And Stomp 442 is good. And then the last couple they've done with Joey back in the band have been great too. But, nothing beats this era of the band to me. At least like this EP, this record, and the record after this. Why can't I think of that? Among the Living. Those are like three perfect records. And they kind of got a little silly after that. And they had the people give them a bad rap because of the goofy nature of how they dressed. They were wearing, Vision streetwear and baseball hats with the brim up. I was going to write "not" on one of my hats and wear that for this, but then I was like, why ruin a hat and write "not" on it? Next time. Yeah, the next Anthrax one we do, we'll put the "not" on there. I'm just going to get a big, good Sharpie for that. And then, of course, there was the rap song, "I'm the Man" in 1987. It was goofy, sure, but it was fun at the time, And then they redeemed themselves in 1991 when they covered "Bring the Noise" with Public Enemy. And I think that gave them a little more clout, with a lot of people, at least me. And they, toured with Public Enemy and Primus right around that time. I think it was in 1991. And that was a great tour. I saw it here at the Orpheum. And my friend and I met Flavor Flav before that show, pretty briefly. We walked down into the alley where the Orpheum is in Boston. You eat with a big, like a Whopper. He was just eating it and said hello to him. Good story. And then, who else was on that tour was the Young Black Teenagers. And we met one of those idiots. But that was also... that wasn't the first time the band collaborated with a hip-hop group. They did a song called Lethal with UTFO in 1987. And it's, nothing special. It's, of its time. And, UTFO were a good early hip-hop group. And, but yeah, you can find this on YouTube or on streaming services. It's pretty easy to find. And yeah, it's pretty good. And again, to end this, this record is nothing spectacular, but I wanted to get some more metal on here. If you have any suggestions for metal records that you think I should talk about here, as long as I own them, because that's kind of the thing. I want to make sure I actually own them. I have a CD of this somewhere, too. I thought about doing, because there is stuff I have here that's just CD, So maybe we'll get to that at some point. I just, Plus, Armed and the other reason, Armed and Dangerous is just one of my favorite metal songs of all time by, of all bands. And so it's a win-win situation. And you get to hear me fucking talk shit about this for 16 minutes or whatever. What's your favorite record by Anthrax? Let me know in the comments, and we'll see you in a week with another episode of Talk About the Collection. Thanks for watching.